We continue now at the top of Daf Chav Gimel Amid Beis Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 23b. On the previous summer, there was a machlokas amoroim between Rav Chisda and Rav Chanina when it comes to nevela b'shchuta, that's cuts of meat that are nevela and cuts of meat that are shchuta. So do we follow the mevatel? Do we follow that which is the majority in terms of determining whether it's min b'mino or min b'she'eno mino, or do we following that which is batel, that which is in the minority? That was a machlokas amoroim. But the Gemara asked, which tanoim are these amoroim following? If they're following the opinion of the Rabbanan say that anything that is olin, anything that ascends the mizbeach, so there is no bittul, there is no nullification. But in terms of min b'mino or min b'she'eno mino, it doesn't make a difference. There is nullification, so it doesn't make sense that they would be arguing within the Rabbanan. And the Gemara continued and said, if they're following Rabbi Yehuda, but the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yehuda basar chazusa azal, Rabbi Yehuda, when he determines what is min b'mino and what's min b'she'eno mino, he goes by how the item looks. He doesn't go by whether it conveys the tumah or not. By nevela and shchuta, it's all cuts of meat. It's just a question whether the meat is nevela and it conveys tumah, or whether it is shchuta and it doesn't convey tumah. But again, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't follow that at all. He follows chazusa. V'idi min b'minohu. In either case, it's going to be of the same kind, because again, it's all dealing with meat. Rashi explains, basar chazusa azal. Rabbi Yehuda follows how it looks. Takamar le'el, he says earlier, ein dam mevatel dam. He says blood is not mevatel blood. V'afal gavshi efshar lios kazeh, even though they're not exactly alike. Hachanami azal basar chazusa. Here too, he would follow what it looks like. V'hoel ushneya min basar, since they're both types of meat, so ein betelim zeh bazeh. So then they're not going to be nullified one in the other. And so again, the question is that machlokas amorim on the previous summon, who is it following? And the Gemara continues, Ella rather alibad Rabbi Chia. It's actually following Rabbi Chia. The Tani Rabbi Chia, because Rabbi Chia taught nevela ushchuta betelos zu bezu, that nevela and shchuta, they are nullified one in the other. And Rashi explains, betelos zu bezu v'Rabbi Chanina v'Rabbi Chisda mefarshi time with Rabbi Chia. What's happening actually is Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Chisda, they're explaining what's the reasoning of Rabbi Chia. Uvaha pligi, and they argue as follows. The Rabbi Chisda savar nevela b'shchuta am Rabbi Chia. Rabbi Chisda says it's nevela in the shchuta. That's what Rabbi Chia was talking about again when he said that there's bittul. V'lo shchuta b'nevela, but not the other way around, when the shchuta is the minority and the nevela is the majority. Rabbi Chanina mefarish Rabbi Chanina simply explains that it's the opposite. Rabbi Chia meant the opposite, but they're arguing within Rabbi Chia, who made that comment that nevela and shchuta are betelo zu bezu. The Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Chia aliba deman. We can still ask Rabbi Chia, who's he following? Again, he aliba de Rabbanan. If he's following the Rabbanan, as we just asked above, ha'amri olin hu delo mevatli hadadi. The Rabbanan say that which ascends the mizbeach, there's no bittul. Hamin b'mino batel, but again, min b'mino would be batel. It wouldn't make sense to have this conversation within the Rabbanan. V'i aliba de Rabbi Yehuda, and if they're following Rabbi Yehuda, kol min b'mino le Rabbi Yehuda lo batel. There's a general rule that anytime you have min b'mino, according to Rabbi Yehuda, there is no bittul. And so the Gemara continues and explains, liolam aliba de Rabbi Yehuda, actually they are following Rabbi Yehuda. V'chi kamer Rabbi Yehuda min b'mino lo batel. And when does Rabbi Yehuda say if it's of the same kind, it's not batel? Hani mili hecha de efshar le lemahave kevasi. That's if it's possible that it can be identical, it could be the same. Aval hecha, but where the lo efshar le lemahave kevasi, if it cannot be the same, so batel, he actually would say there is nullification. And the Gemara continues, uvaha kamiflagi, and they're arguing as follows, and this was explained on the previous Amud by Rashi. The Rav Chisda savar basar mevatel azlinon. Rav Chisda says that we follow the mevatel in making that determination of can it possibly be the same? Can the mevatel change to be the same? We follow what's the majority, what's doing the nullifying. Rabbi Chanina savar, Rabbi Chanina holds basar batel azlinon. We follow the batel, the minority, that which is being nullified. And Rashi explains, Liolam aliv de Rabbi Yehuda, they are following Rabbi Yehuda. Vikasha gabe domim. Now, if you're going to ask the same question we asked above, that by blood it seems like we're following chazusa, it seems like we're following how it looks. By blood, the Yom Rabbi Yehuda le'el ein dam chulin mevatel dam kodshim. Rabbi Yehuda said that the dam of chulin is not going to be mevatel the dam of kodshim. B'shalom al Rabbi Chanina. So I understand, according to Rabbi Chanina, you can say hacha efshar lekodshim lios kemevatlin kechulin. It is possible for the kodshim to be like the mevatlin, to be like the chulin, because shekesha yolin laila echad, let's say it's left overnight for one night, yatsa mikdushasu kechulin, then it actually would convert, so to speak, and become like chulin, so you can at least make that argument. Elul Rav Chisda libatel, but according to Rav Chisda, there should be nullification, doi efshar lechulin, lios kachim, because the chulin can't become like kachim, and so therefore we should say it's really min b'sheino mino. V'havale min b'sheino mino l'Rav Chisda, and therefore it should be like min b'sheino mino. V'have delok Rabbi Chia, and then it's not going to be like Rabbi Chia. And the Gemara continues, Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, Shtei Menachos Shelo Nikmetzu, 2 carbon minchas where the kmitza, the fistful, was not taken, V'nisarvu zu bezu, and they were mixed with one another. So the Mishnah said, Im Yachol Likmotz mizu b'fnei atzma, umizu b'fnei atzma, if one can take the kometz from this one independently and from the other one independently, so then ksheros, then they're kosher, v'imlav, and if not psulos, then they are disqualified. And so the Gemara now continues and asks its question, V'hacha, but over here, Kevan de kometz lei mechada, once the kometz is taken from one of the carbon minchas from that first one, so idach havale shirayim, so the rest of that carbon mincha is now shirayim, it's a remnant of a carbon mincha. V'lo kamevatli shirayim lativla, and clearly the Mishnah is saying that the shirayim is not mevatel the tevel one. The tevel one refers to the other carbon mincha where the kometz was not yet taken. Clearly there is no bittel in this situation. The Mishnah is saying the kometz can be taken from both of them. Now how do we understand this Mishnah? Money, who is this Mishnah following? I Rabbanan, if the Mishnah is following the Rabbanan, ha'amri, but the Rabbanan say, Olin hu delo mevatli hadadi. They say that which ascends the mizbeach, there is no bittel, but hamin bimino batel, but there is bittel when it's of the same kind, and so therefore we should have a problem over here of bittel. This is not all ascending on the mizbeach. We're talking here about kometz, but also about shirayim, about remainder that's eaten by the kohanim, and so therefore, again, according to the Rabbanan, there really should be a problem of nullification in this situation. So Elab Shita, Reb Yehuda, rather it's obvious you have to say that our Mishnah is Reb Yehuda. And so the Gemara says, B'shalom alaman do'amar baser batel azlina. Now, it's good according to the one who says that we follow the thing that's being nullified. So there, batel havikim evatel. So then we could say that in this case, that which is being nullified could be like that which is nullifying it, meaning the lechi kometz meidach, because when the kometz is eventually taken from the other carbon mincha, havel hu shirayim, that's going to be shirayim as well, kihani, just like the other one, and so therefore essentially we can consider it to be like min b'mino, and there's no bittul. Elulamandam baser mevatel azlinan, but according to the one that says we follow the majority, the one that's doing the nullifying, so shirayim miko have tivla, the shirayim can't go back to becoming tevel, the kometz was already taken, that is done, and so therefore the Gemara continues and asks, Leima delok Rabbi Chia, let us therefore say that our Mishnah does not follow Rabbi Chia, and Rashi explains, Havale shirayim, once the kometz is taken from that first mincha, so the rest is remainder, mashin eshtayir mi mincha zu, whatever is remaining from this mincha is shirayim, v'lo mevatli shirayim dehach mincha letivla deidach mincha, and the shirayim, the remainder of this mincha, is not going to be mevatel, it's not going to nullify the tevel of the other mincha is tevel, because that kometz has not yet been taken, and the assumption over here is that the shirayim is majority, it is more than the tevel of the other mincha, mashin esarev shein nikra, whatever is mixed and not recognizable, again, that mincha that is tevel, that part that is mixed of the mincha that is tevel, is not batel, and if it would be batel, then it would be like a carbon mincha, which is lacking before its kometz was taken, because it would be batel, nullification would be the same as chaser, v'lo tahani kamitza liidach, and then the kamitza would not work for that other mincha, but the kamitza does work for the other mincha, and so we see clearly in our Mishnah that there is no bittul. And the Gemara then asked, who is the Tana of our Mishnah? The Gemara said it can't be the Rabbanan, because the Rabbanan hold that Olenhu delo mevatlin, that which ascends the Mizbeach is not mevatel one another, and that's not the case over here, V'shirayim lav oleninu, because the remainder of that first carbon mincha is not ola, it's not going to ascend to the Mizbeach, and so therefore according to the Rabbanan, we should say that there is bittul, even if it was min b'mino, there would be bittul, there would be nullification, and again, clearly in our Mishnah, there is no bittul, and so then the Gemara said that we have to say that the Mishnah is following Rabbi Yehuda, who says that min b'mino is not batel, and that's why, again, in our Mishnah, it is not batel, it is not nullified, but the Gemara said that is not going to work according to Rabbi Chia's interpretation, according to Rav Chisda, as Rashi explains, Leima deloka Rabbi Chia, let us say that it is not like Rabbi Chia, Diamar, because Rabbi Chia said, Lo Amar Rabbi Yehuda de ein batel, Rabbi Yehuda did not say ein batel, he didn't say it's not nullified, Ela heicha de efshar lemahave kivase, only in a situation where it is able to convert and be like that. And again, the question is whether we follow the mevatel or the batel, and in this situation, assuming the shirayim is the majority, and assuming we follow the mevatel, so the shirayim is not able to become like the mincha that is tevel, and so therefore there should be nullification according to Rabbi Yehuda. That's why it's a question of Rabbi Chia's interpretation within Rav Chisda's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda. And Rashi continues, from the fact that the tevel is not mevatel the shirayim, Rashi here is essentially asking, maybe we should assume that the mincha that's tevel is actually majority, and the mincha that's shirayim, the one that the kometz was already taken from, from, that one is minority. And so then we can say that clearly there's no nullification of the shirayim, and that would indicate that we don't follow the batel, we don't follow the minority, because if we follow the minority, the shirayim is not able to become tevel, and therefore we should say again, it's like min b'she'eno mino, and the shirayim is going to be batel. To have a riba sultan, if we're going to say that the shirayim is batel, we should have a problem of riba sultan, we should have a problem of too much flour, because now that shirayim is now batel to the one that is tevel, so all of that flour in the shirayim counts towards the tevel. That's going to be a problem of proportions in terms of the amount of flour to oil. So, but Rashi says, Lo motzi lemifrach l'Rabbi Chanina. That's not a question against Rabbi Chanina. Denema mehacha debasar mevatel azlinan, because then we should suggest against Rabbi Chanina that we must be following the mevatel. Again, let's say we assume that the mincha that's tevel is majority over the mincha that's shirayim, so it would make sense if we're following the mevatel, because then we'll say that the mincha that's tevel, which is the mevatel, can in theory become shirayim, and since it can become shirayim, it becomes min b'mino, and therefore there is no nullification. But again, if you assume like Rabbi Chanina, the reverse, so the one that's the minority, the shirayim, cannot become tevel, and so therefore again you do have a situation of bittul. As Rashi continues, the basar batel azlina, and if we're going to follow the batel, the minority, assuming again the shirayim is the batel, is the minority, so shirayim mihavetivla, the shirayim obviously cannot become tevel, and again then we should have a problem that the shirayim is nullified. But Rashi says that's not a problem. The inami basar batel azlinan, even if we followed the batel, let's say the shirayim was the minority, v'tivla mevatel the shirayim, and the tevel would be mevatel the shirayim, that would not create a problem for the one that's tevel. Lo have a riba salta, that would not be considered too much flour for the one that's tevel, because what we would then simply say is the batel command lesse dummy, the one that was nullified is like it's not there at all, v'lo ayaserle, it doesn't contribute more flour, it doesn't create that problem, and that's why this is a question only in one direction. It's only a question within Rav Chisda's understanding of Rabbi Chia, but not Rabbi Chanina's understanding of Rabbi Chia. And so again, in any case, the question of the Gemara is against Rabbi Chia within Rav Chisda, that if we follow the mevatel over here, if the shirayim is the majority, the shirayim obviously cannot become tevel, and so therefore you have a situation where it really should be min b'she'eno mino, and the shirayim really should have been mevatel the tevel, and that's not the case in the Mishnah. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hasam kid Rabbi Zera. Over there, the answer is like Rabbi Zera said. Diyamar Rabbi Zera, because Rabbi Zera said, Nemra haktara b'kometz, it says the word haktara by the kometz, by the fistful of the carbon mincha, which is burned. V'nemra haktara b'shirayim, it also uses the word haktara by shirayim, by the remainder of a carbon mincha, and we make the following comparison. Ma haktara ha'amura b'kometz, just like the haktara which is stated by the kometz, there's a general rule, ein hakometz mevatel es chavero, one kometz is not mevatel another, that all agree to. Af haktara ha'amura b'shirayim, so too it says haktara b'shirayim, and so we make the same type of halacha in shirayim mevatel es hakometz. There's a general rule, shirayim is not mevatel kometz, and it's based on that rule that the shirayim over here is not mevatel the mincha that's tevel, even though the mincha that's tevel is not technically kometz, but a kometz can be taken from any part of that carbon mincha, and therefore there's a general rule, shirayim is not mevatel the kometz, and that explains our Mishnah. And Rashi explains haktara b'shirayim, it says the word haktara by the shirayim, the pasuk says, ki kol so'or v'chol devash, lo saktiru mimenu isha la'Hashem, it says so'or and devash cannot be burned on the mizbeach, v'yamrinan kol shemimenu l'ishim, we say that includes anything that something is taken from it and goes on the fire. Dahainu shirayim, that's the remainder of the mincha, you take the kometz from the mincha, you burn the kometz, and the shirayim, that does not go on the mizbeach, hareu bebal taktiru, that's not supposed to be burned. But the point is, alma, iko haktara b'shirayim, we see that there is a concept of haktara, or haktara is mentioned by the shirayim, and so therefore again we learn this halacha, ein shirayim mevatel es hakometz, and again ein hakometz mevatel es chavera, we know that one kometz is not mevatel another, doha afilu Rabbi Yehuda moda, the fact that one kometz is not mevatel another, that even Rabbi Yehuda admits to, to lo polig Rabbi Yehuda b'masnisan an nisarev komtza b'kometz chaverta, Rabbi Yehuda never argues in our Mishnah on the case of nisarev komtza b'kometz chaverta. As we mentioned on the Mishnah on Daf Chav Beis Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yehuda only argues where blilosa oven, blilosa raka mix, where there's a different proportion of oil that's mixing together. But in a case where one kometz is mixed with another, there again, ein hakometz mevatel es chavera, one kometz is not mevatel the other. And again, as we said, the same thing is true with ein shirayim mevatel es hakometz. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof from the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, HaKometz shenisarev b'mincha shelo nikmitza. Let's say you have a kometz that gets mixed up with a karban mincha where the kometz was not taken. So lo yaktir, it shouldn't be burned on the Mizbeach. V'yim hikter, and if it is burned on the Mizbeach, zusha nikmitza, the mincha where the kometz was taken, also lebailim, that will fulfill the obligation of the owner. V'zusha lo nikmitza, the one that the kometz wasn't taken, lo also lebailim, that will not fulfill the obligation of the owner. And again, the Gemara asks a similar question as before. V'lo kamevata le tivla lekometz. In this case, the Mishnah does not say that the tevel is mevatel, nullifies the kometz. The kometz is in fact accepted on the mizbeach. And so who's the author of our Mishnah? Rabbanon, again, if you're going to say the Tan of our Mishnah is the Rabbanon, ha'amri olin hu de lo mevatli hadadi, they say that if it all ascends to the mizbeach, that is not mevatel one another. Hamin b'mino batel, but other than that, if you have a situation, even if it's min b'mino, it is batel, it is nullified, and so we should have a problem over here. We should have a situation of bittel of the kometz. Elapshita Reb Yehuda. Rather, again, you have to obviously say that this is Reb Yehuda. This is somehow following the idea that min b'mino is not batel, and that's why, again, it says if you have a kometz that gets mixed up with a mincha shelo nikmitza, apparently that's considered min b'mino. But again, we have the same kind of question. B'shalom alaman da'amar basar mevatel azlinan. It makes sense according to the one who says we follow the mevatel. So mevatel have a kebatel. Then we could say that the mincha where the kometz wasn't taken, ultimately the kometz can be taken. It can be like the batel. It can be like the other kometz. T'chol porsa, because every small part of the karban mincha, chazi lemikmatz minei, it's possible to take the kometz from there. V'havale minu mino, and then it's min b'mino. Umin b'mino lo batel, and again there's a rule of min b'mino. It's not batel. That could explain the Mishnah. Elalaman damar basar batel azlina, but according to the one who says we follow the batel, in this case the kometz, that which is the minority, so kometz miko havetivl, is it possible for the kometz to be tevel? And so therefore, of course, that is not possible, and therefore, again, why is the kometz not batel in our Mishnah? And lema de lo Rabbi Chia, again, let us say this doesn't follow Rabbi Chia's interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, as we said above, and the Gemara gives the exact same answer. Hanami k'Rabbi Zera. There also we can answer like Rabbi Zera. We said again, according to Rabbi Zera, there's a general rule, ein shirayim mevatlan es hakometz, and the same thing is true over here. This essentially would fall into the category of ein shirayim mevatlan es hakometz. Now, even though this is a case of mincha that's tevel, but by mincha that's tevel, a kometz will be taken. It's essentially made up of kometz and shirayim. We know kometz is not mevatel kometz. We already said shirayim, according to Rabbi Zera, is not mevatel kometz. So if kometz is not mevatel kometz and shirayim is not mevatel kometz, so a mincha that's tevel, which is essentially a combination of the two, is not going to be mevatel kometz. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof from the Mishnah. Nesarev komsa b'shirayim shel chaverta. Let's say its kometz gets mixed up with the remainder of another karban mincha. Again, lo yaktir, it shouldn't be burned on the mizbeach. Vim hiktir, and if it is burned on the mizbeach, also lebailim, it will fulfill the obligation of the owner. And again, the same question. V'hacha de lo have mevatel kebatel v'lo kamevatli le shirayim lekometz. Again, in this situation, the shirayim is not mevatel the kometz, even though the mevatel, the shirayim, is never going to become a kometz. And so, money, who does this follow? Rabbanon, if it follows the Rabbanon, etc. And the Gemara again answers, but this is the original place where Rabbi Zera made his statement. Amar Rabbi Zera says, Nemra haktara bekometz, it says haktara by the kometz, v'nemra haktara b'shirayim, it says haktara by the remainder. Ma haktaro hamura bekometz, and kometz mevatel es chavero, just like the haktara that said by the kometz, one kometz is not mevatel the other. Af haktaro hamura b'shirayim, so too it says haktara b'shirayim, ein shirayim mevatel es hakometz, the shirayim is not mevatel the kometz. So again, essentially the Gemara was asking the same question. The Gemara was asking, in this situation of a shirayim and a kometz, in this case both, neither side can convert to be like the other one, so there should be bittul, there should be nullification. And again, the Gemara answered with Rabbi Zera that ein shirayim mevatlin es hakometz. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, another proof. This is from a brisa. The brisa is discussing matzah and Pesach. It says tivla beketzach b'shum shaminu v'chol minei tavlin. Let's say he spices, the way Rashi understands, the dough that's making the matzah with ketzach, which is a kind of spice, shumsham and sesame, uvechol mini tavlin, or any kinds of spices. Keshera, it is kosher. Matzah, that is considered to be matzah. Elishenikris matzah metuvelis, but it's called matzah that has spices, but it's still called matzah. And the Gemara now says, Kasal Gadaitach, initially we think, the apish lo tavlin tfei mi matzah. The case over here in the Brisa says there's actually majority tavlin more than matzah. There's more tavlin than matzah. And again, we're back to our question, why isn't there bittul? There should be nullification. B'shalam Elaman Damar Basar Batal Azlina. Now it's good according to the one who says we follow the minority, in this case the matzah, that which is being nullified. So we could say that the matzah can become like spices in the sense that the matzah can become not kosher as matzah. Batal Havikim Evatal, we can say that the thing being nullified, the minority, can convert into what's nullifying it. To the Chima Afsha, because let's say it spoils, let's say it gets moldy, Havila Ketavlin, so then it gets into the category of Tavlin, it's no longer good as matzah, and so then one can say that it's like min b'mino, and that's why there's no bittul. Elalaman damar basar mevatel azlina, but again, according to the one who says we follow the mevatel, in this case the spices, so Tavlin miko have a matzah, the Tavlin obviously cannot convert into any category of matzah, and so therefore you're never going to get to min b'mino, and therefore the Tavlin really should be mevatel the matzah. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hachav Mayaskinan, here, what are we dealing with? It's the opposite. The lo apish la tavlin, it's not a situation where there's more spices. The ruba matzi, the majority actually is matzah. Velo batla, and therefore, since the majority is matzah, it is not going to be batal. And the Gemara continues, Dekanami, we can prove this as well. The katani matzahi, it says that it's matzah. Elashenikres matzah metuvelas, but it's referred to as matzah metuvelas. So if we're talking about a situation where the matzah is the majority, obviously the matzah is not going to be batal, and the Gemara says Shema Mina. Indeed, we see that this is the case. And the Gemara continues, Kisalik Rav Kahana, when Rav Kahana went up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkachinu livnei Rabbi Chia, he found the sons of Rabbi Chia, the Yasvi v'Ka'amri, they were sitting and they were saying as follows, Isaron shechilka, if you have an Isaron, which is a tenth of an ephah used for a karba mincha, let's say it becomes divided, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video, on Daf Chav Dalid Amud Aleph.